presentation from Mr. Yocum with the Audubon Society. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Hey, the way what I looked at after that other talk was over, it was very good. She covered at least half of what I was going to say. No, but there's nothing like duplicity to learn how to do it. So if you hear it again and again and again, it's good. Now, I want you to hear, and it's probably going to, even with this stuff, it's better to come up a little bit. I mean, maybe it goes to the back, but it's kind of like college. Everybody sits in the back. Nobody wants to get up front. My name's Hal Yocum, and I'm a member of the Audubon Society. And I've got let's see, what did I do with my paper? I've got this little thing. My approach to this is maybe a little different than what your other speakers have been. I'm approaching it from the standpoint of the birds. That's what I do, the birds. Now, if you're doing a garden, that's what we're talking about, how to do your garden, and maybe to attract birds. Birds need three things. What are they? Food, water, shelter. All right? Those are the things they need. And they're pretty good at knowing if it's there. I don't know how they get it in their little bird brain to know to land in your yard. But, you know, it seems like if you provide those things, it'll work out pretty good. Now, in the wintertime, you have to do something special with the water. What do you need to do? You need a heater. Otherwise, your water freezes, you know. And the only birds that can get through that are woodpeckers. They get around your frozen water thing, and it's solid ice or almost solid ice. It's like maybe a little water underneath. And if you watch them, they'll start pecking all the way around the edge to get the water to come out. And that's a good idea. If you have a heater and that happens, your heater ain't working. Okay? So they need things that work for them. And you can use almost anything as long as it's water, food, and shelter. Now, the question is, how many birds do you want? Do you want all the possible species of birds to come? Or you just want to select certain birds for your yard? Because, you know, some people want to have bluebirds and hummingbirds and nothing else. Okay? Now, that's kind of easy because you can supply the hummingbird food, and on the corner of your lot, you can put a bluebird box, things like that. But if you want more different birds, you need to supply a little variety of things. Like the other lady was saying, things at almost every level, they fly. So they need a big tree. That when there's lots of trees, the birds kind of find that and they work their way down. Now, if you want every kind of bird like I do in my yard, I even want the predator birds. Hawks. I had a Cooper's hawk sitting up in my tree this morning. I told him, he didn't hear me, but I told him he was a little early. You know, there's nobody there very much at the moment. And because like today, I think I'm getting about 4 or 5 different species of bird in the yard. And they're the same every day, and he's the first hawk I've seen, so they must not be the favorites, you know. But I think that one other way to look at it is if you want to have all the birds come and not kill them, so to speak, you have to eliminate some of the things like the lady mentioned. You want to don't throw your stuff away. Cut it and use it and keep it. But also, you can't spray. If you spray, like this guy comes around, knocks on your door and says, hey, I can go around your house and I can spray it, you know. That doesn't work too good for birds. Kills the things that are there, and there's no food left. See? So you don't want to spray. And that bothers some people because, there's things that you don't like, Now, if you get a whole bunch of bees coming in some of the holes she was talking about, if they're the dangerous ones are the bigger wasps, and if they're real close to a door or a pathway through your garden, that might be something you want to eliminate, that nest, that particular bee nest. But those are usually wasps and hornets. And only when they're somewhere where your grandkids or your live-at-home kid, how many of you got a live-at-homer? But no, I had one that lasted till 24, but he's gone now. So, I mean, you want your yard to be relatively safe for everybody that's there. You don't want to have somebody coming in and getting, the kids are running around to get stung or something. Now, I don't think we have, none of the yards that I've been to, including mine, mine doesn't have any fire ants. Do any of you have fire ants? Okay, now if you get them, I think you need to probably eliminate those. That's probably, it's a bother to everybody that's walking around in their bare feet in the grass, so that's safety is an important thing. One of the things that I didn't hear the speaker mention that I think is important for birds is what kind of feed you do. See, you can do with flowers, particularly tubular flowers, like autumn sage and most of the mint family, that kind of thing. That's pretty good for the hummingbirds because there's a whole lot of hummingbirds that eat insects and just a few that eat the sugar. Now, some bigger birds will get on your hummingbird feeder, but by the way, they're pretty too, so orioles do that, and a couple of the little warblers will do that. If you're lucky enough to get orange crown warbler in your yard, they'll find your hummingbird feeder. Had one in my yard just the other day. Now in the wintertime, didn't turn that off. Let's see if Mother's calling. No. In the wintertime, most of the birds that are going to be in your yard are seed eaters. Okay? So there's insect eaters and seed eaters. And in the April, May, and June time and through the summer, that's when you're going to get all the insects, and that's when you're going to have insect-eating birds, like bluebirds and mockingbirds and things like that. In the wintertime, sparrows and woodpeckers and titmice and those kind of birds, they don't eat bugs. They eat seeds. So things like suet and a feeder with variety, the kind of food you put in it, there's a lot of different food available. Tractor Supply is a good place to get mixed food, I'll call it. And but you can see what kind of food the store has to sell. You can even make your own suet if you want to. But see, what you're doing is you're supplying one of the things they need in the wintertime. It's completely different than the summer because they have a whole different need. Yeah.
Can you talk about, speaking of winter, can you talk about when we have these really deep freeze events, what we can do to help birds?
Yeah, what you got to do there, and we seem to have one about every year. Well, what I do, and I think it works pretty good, is you trudge out there in your boots, and if you need to, take a little shovel with you, and bang, 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 dig a hole in the snow. Now, if you put it on top of the snow, food on top of the snow, it'll probably melt in, but you can make a little clearing here and there around the edge of the bushes or around some plants or something, around the base of a tree, and then you can put the food there. Now, you really got to have that water for them in the wintertime, though, because I can remember the most birds I've ever had in my yard in one day is 24. And it was in the deep freeze. They all come to my yard because all the things they still need are there. There's still food there, there's water there, and there's shelter there. Now let's talk a little bit more about the shelter. There's lots of things that offer birds shelter. They don't all live in birdhouses, but they need places to hide. How many of you have a yard where you do have hawks? Anybody?
Yep.
Okay. Now, now the hawks are going to succeed every now and then, even in a good yard. But if they don't succeed, they die. They have to eat too. So you have to sacrifice the sparrows and an occasional woodpecker and a little wren. There is a little bit of my wife says, go out there and chase that hawk away. I like to watch them because they are they're really neat birds, especially the Cooper's hawks and the sharp-shinned hawks. They're the bird eaters. Now, in my yard, they'll sit on the fence, and they're just sitting there, and you can't find one bird that's visible moving. They know. And then they'll hop down off of it in my yard, and what they do is they go around to the hedges. They'll hop on the ground, they'll hop in the hedge, they'll hop up on top of the hedge and walk along it. They're trying to flush the birds, see? So you need thick hedges or thick things that the hawks can't get through. So some of your bushes and shrubs will do that kind of thing, or hedges will do it too. They're so thick the hawk is too big to get through there. But you would be surprised how agile the hawks are. But now you can also learn a lot from the hawks. Once they're done, you can go out and look at the feathers on the ground and see what kind of a bird it was. You can learn a little bit from it. And I think it's interesting to get the whole picture of nature like that. Like the lady said, your garden is yours. You got to do with it what you want. And if you want to favor some birds, you supply the things they need. And if you're lucky enough to have some wires and telephone poles around, that doesn't happen too much anymore. Everything's underground. You even get different birds right along the edge of your property. Up on the wires, you get the scissor tails and things like that. They're not coming to your yard. They're just using the wire. Now, one of the interesting things that I've had that I learned that I didn't think would ever happen. How many of you know what a junco bird is? It's a little gray, tiny bird. Well, one of them came to my house one winter. I noticed it about the middle of December, and it was all spotted with white. It was sort of, it's like leucistic is our word for that in the bird world. It's not an albino because it's not completely white. And it was easy to identify that bird. He hopped all over the yard all winter long, eating the suet and the other ground food that I put out. And he stayed all the way till March. I recorded it every day that the junco was there. I mean, I knew there were a lot of juncos there, but I knew that one, that was Spot. See? Now, Spot flew away around March. And lo and behold, the next November, Spot returned. I mean, I knew there were juncos returning, and they almost all of them from here either go up to the juncos, go up to like South Dakota, to the hills, or to the Rockies, that kind of place, to where they live higher up in the summer. But I couldn't believe that little junco could go from my yard all the way to the Rocky Mountains and then come back the next year. And he stayed from November till March. Now, he didn't come back last year. And we're going to see if he makes it back this year. Most birds live about 4 to 5 years. If somebody gets them or they get sick or they die. Now, if you have feeders, I want to talk about the feeders. You've got to keep them clean. So your hummingbird feeders, how often do you clean it? You could do it every day. If they're eating it all, it gets down there before.
Oh, when it gets over 90 degrees,
Yeah.
95 degrees.
Yeah.
You better change it.
You better change it. Have any of you ever had the distinct pleasure of, oh, there's a hummingbird on my feeder, and while you're watching him, all of a sudden, he goes, whoop, and he's upside down, hanging on upside down. And occasionally he'll go bonk right on the ground. That means you didn't clean it. He's drunk. So that's the importance in relation to hummingbirds. If it's real hot, you really need to clean it a lot. But even then, sometimes you forget, and they'll tell you, yes. When it's hot, or if some people are lucky and they attract a lot of hummingbirds and they drain the thing every day almost, you know. Now, how many of you have ever been out to, I'll say southeast Arizona to look for birds? Anybody do that kind of thing? Crazy enough to do that? I'm leaving Monday morning for Tucson. But out there are people who buy a property and turn it into a bird paradise. And I mean, they put up hummingbird feeders and all kind of feeders and different things. It's a little harder to do that here. But if you create the things that we talked about, food, water, and shelter, you'll probably have a reasonable bird paradise if you do that. And I don't think it makes a lot of difference what plants you use, whether they're native or introduced plants, you know. But like I heard the lady showed some pictures of lantana, and that's hummingbirds like that, butterflies like that. I mean, I suspect it sounds to me like it comes from the Orient somewhere, but I'm not sure where it originates. But most of the mint plants are pretty good. And any flower that's cone-shaped, you know, that's got that long little tube for hummingbirds. But the hummingbird feeders are the hardest to keep clean, and it's probably the most important. And I talk a lot about hummingbirds because hummingbirds and bluebirds are my two favorite birds. You know, they're not too hard to attract, and they're pretty, you know. Now, let's try to think of there was one other thing that I wanted to say. In relation to the birds of prey, if you have quite a few birds in your yard, they're going to show up, and I don't think there's too much you can do about it. But occasionally they'll get squirrels. Now, that gets me to squirrels. If you're going to feed birds, you're going to have squirrels. So you can separate your feeders. In other words, you can put the squirrely type food in one spot and the bird food that you want the birds to get in a different spot. You basically have to feed the squirrels to get the birds. And how many of you have ever had squirrels in your attic? Yeah. I had 8 of them in my attic when I started hearing them running around at night. But that's another problem. But I don't think there's any way to defeat the squirrels that I'm aware of unless you get really mean with a pellet gun. But that's probably illegal in your neighborhood. And it happened to me. The neighborhood group the guy who was in charge of it over, he says, "Hal, I heard you've been shooting a gun." I said, "Well, it's a pellet gun. Do you know we have an ordinance? Not even a BB gun. So shooting them is not a good option. I don't think trapping them is a good option. You just have to feed them and put up with them, you know. Different birds need different kinds of environments. if you have a big enough yard, you can have some of your yard that's what I'd call open, like a lawn, and you'll get certain kind of birds on that kind of an environment. Like robins will show up to look for things. In other words, you don't have to have bushes everywhere. You need some open space for certain birds, sparrows and things. And then you need the hedges and the trees, but you also need a variety of environments for the birds to be in, because they kind of like, some people say, I can't get any bluebirds to come to my bluebird house. Well, if there's no lawn there, the best you're probably going to do for bluebirds is put it on the corner of your property facing the biggest space out there. I'm lucky, I have a soccer field right on one corner. So I can get the bluebirds, they love the soccer field and they love my water. So they come to me for the water, but I don't have what they need for food most of the time. Although,
Grasses?
what?
What do they like? Grass?
Yard and the insects that are in the grass, moss and they don't do ants. There's certain birds that do ants. I mean, flickers and some of the woodpeckers like ants, so they'll go for the ants. But they'll be out on the yards where there's just grass, or baseball fields, football fields, that kind of thing. So if you live close to a sports complex, that's kind of lucky. But not everybody does that. But maybe you'll have a neighbor who doesn't do anything to the yard. Anybody got that going on? I got one like that. I can tell you there's one thing in her backyard. Guess what it is? It's a meter. It's a big thing that sticks out of the ground about 3 feet, and the rest of it's all grass, So she doesn't do much of anything. So the birds will come if you provide those 3 things. You've got to provide food, water, and shelter. There's one more aspect if you want some really interesting things in your garden. You can assist them a little bit by providing things they need to nest. Okay? A lot of them line their nest with hair and string and yarn and little, I wouldn't call them trinkets, but I think some of the stores even sell it. They sell this little fluff ball that you hang up so that they can come and pull it out. But if you have any animals in your house, they shed. And you're always cleaning it off of your sofa, or especially out from under the bed. You can get really good fur balls. Take them outside and just sit them somewhere by a bush, and you'd be surprised, they'll come and take it. I've even seen some birds land on an animal and pluck hair. Now, they don't do it on little animals mostly. They do it on horses and cows and dogs. They'll get a hair, So if you want to get, there's little tiny birds called wrens. They're all over the place. They're not hard to get to your house. But if you want a really good experience, you need to have places where they've got little nooks and crannies where they can build their nest, those kind of things. And if you have a planter hanging on a deck or something, they'll probably find your planter and put a nest right in the middle of it. One of the things that I brought along with me is some books and some magazines here that have they're more about birds, but they're also about plants that might be helpful. How many of you have ever seen Birds in Blooms? Okay, I got 4 or 5 of those up here, and they're giveaway free. And Birds in Blooms also publishes a really cool book every year. I've got 3 or 4 of them here. Now this you have to pay for. You pay a little for the magazine. You pay about $30 every year to get this. You don't have to, you just do it. So I do it. Now, after about 10 years worth of this, you've got an awful lot of books. See, they get stacked up. So if any of you want a Bird and Bloom book, you can have it too. They're free. And I'll take some questions if you got any mostly about the birds. I don't know the names of all the plants. I know a lot of them, but I don't know them all.
During migration, is there something special you can do during migration to make them stop?
Well, mostly not really in a yard. They just pick it out because it's looks like it's got plants and a variety of stuff. You know, now Myriad Gardens in the middle of town, you can go to Myriad Gardens and learn a lot of things there about the plants you can plant, what are the choices, and you'll notice amazing variety of flowers and plants. And they like to come to the Myriad Gardens. Right now there's 5 million or 4 million birds that were supposed to fly over in the next 2 or 3 days. I thought there were maybe some small percentage, like 50 or 100 or so, would land in Myriad Gardens. So I got up and rushed down to Myriad Gardens this morning. Anybody else know what was at Myriad Gardens this morning?
Oh, parade or something, I don't know.
There was a 5K run to support the Down Syndrome Association. So, as I got close to where you could park around Myriad Gardens, I said, man, there's a lot of cars here. What's going on? And then I had to go around 2 halves of the little block before I could find a spot. There was me and 3,000 people there. And on top of that, they had blaring music the entire time. I mean, bump to bump, you know, whatever you call that kind of stuff. A little bit out of my line for music. And we bird people, we have an app. And you can learn an awful lot from the apps that are available. I don't do too many plant apps, but they've got plant recognition apps and flower recognition apps, and believe it or not, bird recognition apps. They've even got one that hears the birds that I can no longer hear. Isn't that right, John? Yeah, I can't hear them, you know. So I play my app the whole time when I'm out there checking out particularly the little birds. And even in your yard, an app is very helpful. You see a bird on your feeder that you don't know, or bopping around the ground or something like that. If you have one of these bird recognition apps, I don't have the one for color. I think if you take a picture of it, it'll recognize it. There's an app like that. And there's one, something about yellow bird or different colored birds. It'll recognize them that way. Mine recognizes them by sound. Now, this time of year, most of them aren't talking too well because birds are a little bit different than people. People talk all the time. Birds only communicate a lot in the springtime. April and May. They chitter, 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 chitter. That's how we find them. Now, they also do it when they're flying. Birds migrate by sound and by this little tiny part of their brain that's related to the force field around the Earth, the magnetic field. I mean, they all have a bird brain. It isn't very big. But this is something that they studied robins to find out, because there's robins everywhere. They wanted to see if they captured robins from all over the country, different sections, not too many of them, but they would tag them with the little things on their leg, band them, and then they all leave. And then they come back the next spring. And they found out on the average that if they're born in Oklahoma, around Oklahoma City, they'll come within about 5 miles of where they were born. And so all the robins that are flying up from Texas and Mexico, that's about as far as they go. They don't go too much farther south. When they get here, they know, if they were born here, they know it's time to go down. But the ones that were born in Alaska, they know I got a long way to go. And they just keep going until they somehow recognize that particular area. So, any other questions?
I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, in the wintertime when it's really cold and you'll have a big flock of birds and they just chitter, 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 and they're making all that kind of noise around the feeders. Why do they do that?
I don't know. It's like a bird party. It's kind of like a people party, you know. It's actually, no, they don't have drinks, but they want to be able to drink. So there's the water. But I don't know why they do that, but they certainly do it. And even if you sit out on your deck in the wintertime when there's an ice storm or whatever it is, it's a couple days old, they come in and they do a lot of chittering, whereas most of the time they don't. They just come down and land and eat and that kind of stuff.
They're talking about where they're spending their vacation, where they're gonna, in the summertime, yeah, they're gonna be plans on vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that some of them do that. A lot of them flock in the wintertime that they don't do in the summertime, because they're busy with raising babies, you know. So, but one of the things that some birds have been studied enough that we know they have a lot of sounds that they make. I think they say a crow has 20 different sounds, and a mockingbird it's over 200.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the mockingbird sounds are copying other birds, because a mockingbird is really good at, and a blue jay is really good at sounding like a hawk, and that kind of thing. So, some of the sounds mean different things to the other birds of their species. I think there's the crows in particular. One of them that has something to do with, they make that sound. It tells other crows there's food here. So something like that, or there's a predator here. You know, and how many of you ever seen the crows mob something? They mob owls and hawks. You know. Yeah, they'll dive at them and things like that. But any other questions? Yeah.
So last winter, I found a few dead birds that had frozen in like the negative 30 degrees.
Yeah.
There was also a couple that were on my porch, just kind of hunkering down. Is there anything that we can build in like an area that could kind of give them a little bit of shelter from that kind of thing? Because I don't like finding dead birds on my porch.
Yeah.
Well, I would put that in this. I would put it in the same category as if you find a baby bird. I would say you pretty much should leave it alone. If it's a baby bird, the mothers will find it, and if it's a wintertime bird and it's injured, or if it's flown into the window or something, I don't see anything wrong if it's just sitting there. What I've done with my kids, now my grandkids, is I have small boxes. They're not very, only about like a 5 or 6 inch. You could use a bigger box, you know. I mean, not bigger, longer, but taller. I just put stuff in there and carefully pick it up and put it in there. But if you're going to pick up a bird in the wintertime, or even any time of year, it could be diseased. The bird flu that's going around is pretty malignant. It affects some groups of birds more than others. Jays and crows get a lot of it. Last year out at Lake Hefner, when the water was down, about like it is now, there's a lot of dirt out there now, there were dead pelicans laying all over the place, about 20 or 30 of them. And they got them and checked them, and they thought they all had the bird flu,
Had what?
avian flu, and the avian flu that's going around the world now has also spread to mammals and to a few people. Now, most of the people that get it are people who work with birds, like chicken farmers and the mammals that are getting the avian flu. There's big dairy farms that the cattle get it, and then the people have to work with the dairy every day to milk them and all that kind of stuff. Some humans have gotten avian flu from that, but only a few cases. In humans, it's very mild, you know. But they say all the cats can get it and all the dogs can get it. Even in the zoos around the country, they found it. They found it in some of the things like seals and stuff like that. You know, so I don't think it's dangerous, but if I'm going to do a very well preserved dead bird, in other words, it's not all eaten up or anything, I use gloves or a towel or paper towels, and then I put it in a plastic bag and freeze it, and then I take it over to OCU or OSU, one of the universities, to study it to see if it's a diseased bird. You know, I found hawks laying on my driveway and robins just laying there on the ground. Nothing bothered them. I didn't think they hit anything. Now, some of the birds will hit your windows, and those will mostly recover. But in the wintertime, I think the minimal amount, a little bit of support to see if they'll get up and fly away again. And I've done that with hummingbirds. Anybody rescued a hummingbird? You know, they'll run into your window. And I have a window feeder, and it fell on the feeder. So I just moved the food out of the way and let it lay there and kept watching, and pretty soon it perked up and went away. Now in the wintertime, I don't think that's going to happen. So it's different in the winter. You might need to bring it inside till it, but if you don't have a top on it, if you bring it inside, you're going to have a good time catching it once it wakes up. You know. Anything else? Oh, over there?
So now that we're getting these deep freezes really regularly, is there
Yeah.
a more robust shelter we can provide them with? You know, like I
Yeah.
say, for like cats and dogs. You know,
Yeah,
the
that's
insulated
kind of what
boxes or-
that's kind of what he asked. The same thing. I don't think it's practical, because even if Walmart was selling one bird shelter, I'm not sure how many they'd sell. Probably wouldn't be on the market very long, and you might never have a need for it. It's a few and far between thing, at least in my experience, in the winter, that is, you know. Now, you can be as trying to think of what we call that, mother henning. If you take care of everything you see that looks like it might need help, you know, you can give it your best shot and see how it goes.
Well, I mean, I think if you leave your native grasses, like your tall grasses, they shelter in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of those in
I know
the
they're sparrows.
well, but in the wintertime, most of them are going to die back, and they'll be, as long as you're not cutting them and throwing them
Yeah,
away,
leave 'em.
it could be there. Yeah, yeah.
And when we had that real severe ice storm, we had a lot of broken branches. We have a shed, and we just piled the branches behind our shed, and they winter in there.
Oh yeah, they get in around. I mean, a pile of branches is just like trying to fill a jar that's full of marbles, and you think it's full till you pour water in it. And then after you get it full of water, you can put sugar in it, and it all gets in there. There's a lot of space in between things, and that's a good little homey place. I don't hardly throw anything away. You know. Any other questions? I want to Anybody interested in knowing anything about the Audubon Society? Well, the Oklahoma City Audubon Society meets on the third Monday of every month except January. And it does not meet in July or August. So it goes September to January on the third Monday. And in January, the third Monday is always Martin Luther King Day. So we meet on the third Tuesday. And then the rest of the spring, like February, March, April, May, and June, we meet on the third Monday at Will Rogers Park. I'm trying to think of the name of that building.
Exhibition building.
Exhibition building, yeah. And there's a nice parking lot there. The meeting starts at 7 o'clock, and everybody kind of shows up somewhere between 6 and 7. And we have pretty good speakers. And it's not always on birds. We've had a variety of things. Some of it's on plants. And so I think we've had master gardeners come to that meeting and give us a talk. We've had people. There's a guy up Perkins. In Perkins, there's a guy that raises snakes. Did you know that? He raises albino pythons. And he brought one to the meeting. Were you there, John? Yeah. I mean, it was sort of like after he talked about a variety of snakes and how some of them are rare, and there's a market in snakes, although it's generally illegal unless you have permits. But somebody, I think he told us when he got the snake, the white snake, I think he paid $10,000 for it. And it was young, but he got 2 of them so he could breed them. And he supplies almost all the big snakes you see in movies. The big white snakes around some dancer. You know, they use them in Vegas, you know, and places like that. But we've had other talks about ecology. We've had a speaker on the bird flu. Trying to think of some of the other. We've had one on butterflies, one on banding variety of animals, including monarchs. There was a little bit of a TV blurb on doing monarchs last night. I saw it on Channel 8. They were catching them at scissortail and banding them right there with that little dot that they put on the monarchs.
Tagging them.
Yeah.
Huh?
Tagging.
Tagging?
Tagging them, yeah.
Yeah. It must be sticky.
It is.
It is.
Yeah. And every once in a while down in the mountains like the Wichita's or further south at the Hackberry Flats, I was there when the people from Stillwater were there because the monarchs had accumulated all in one place on a bunch of trees, and they had the road blocked off. And they said, we're banding monarchs. You can drive through the road, but go very, very slowly. And when I went through there, I don't think you could have put your hand on any tree that there wasn't monarchs on. They were on the trunk and on the leaves. They were on everything. Thousands of them.
Yeah, it's called roosting.
Yeah, is that what it's called? Yeah, we do that every night. You know. Any other interesting questions? Have I convinced anybody to become a birder?
In our backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.